They called her Miss Dusty, not because her clothes were dirty, but because she never quite sparkled like the rest. Her shoes were scuffed. Her coat was worn. Her hands were clean but cracked. In a town where appearances whispered louder than character, the orphan teacher stood alone at the edge of every conversation. She lived in a small cabin on the hill, just beyond the last bus stop. No car, no family, no rings. No one ever saw her cry, but they always saw her alone. Each morning, she arrived at school carrying the same bag and the same quiet dignity. The kids liked her. They said she smelled like old books and peppermint. But the staff? They chuckled. Some even rolled their eyes when she passed. They said things like, "She doesn't belong here," or "She probably failed at life before ending up here." No one asked about her past. No one wondered where she came from. To them, she was just another sad story, a woman who wore hope, like an old sweater, patched up and out of style. But then, one rainy morning, the janitor found a diary in the teacher's lounge. It was leather-bound, torn at the edges, forgotten beneath the radiator. He opened it, expecting grocery lists or poetry. What he found inside would rewrite everything. The diary wasn't written by a broken woman. It was the voice of someone hiding in plain sight. Page after page glowed with a life no one imagined. Palaces, codes, secret visits to orphanages, a mother who vanished in the night, a king who never named his heir, and one final message, pressed in ink that never faded. "My name is not Miss Dusty. My name is Princess Alira, last daughter of the crown of Everwin. And I have come here, not to teach, but to watch." But before he could turn another page, the principal stormed in, saw the diary in his hands, and yanked it away like a secret weapon. He smiled like he knew something. Then he whispered, "Some things are better left unread." And just like that, the diary vanished. But the story had already begun. After the diary disappeared, something changed. Not in her, but in the town. The janitor, now silent, swept the halls slower than usual. The librarian stopped glancing over her glasses whenever Miss Dusty passed by. And the principal? He watched her from the office window like a man guarding a vault. They all began to wonder if she was truly nobody. Why did her past need hiding? Miss Dusty, Alira, didn't speak of the diary. She continued teaching her class with the same soft patience. Same warm glances, same gentle voice. But one day, a curious student raised her hand and asked a question that made the room go still. "Why does the school's registry say you don't have a birth record?" The teacher's eyes didn't blink. Instead, she simply smiled and replied, "Sometimes, the most important things in this world aren't written down." That night, the school's record clerk, Mrs. Dawes, searched the National Archive. No name, no file, no birthplace. Miss Dusty didn't exist before she came to town. That shouldn't have been possible. But across the country, in a private archive in a forgotten embassy, an old man stared at the exact same name. He lit a candle, pulled out a sealed envelope, and placed it into a leather pouch marked with a royal crest. His instructions were clear. Deliver it to the woman who teaches in silence, who wears her crown inside her heart. Meanwhile, the whispers in town turned to suspicion. The staff said she was a fraud. The townspeople thought she was hiding something criminal. The students just felt something bigger was happening, something adults were too proud to see. One afternoon, the principal called her into the office. He poured tea, offered her sugar, and stared hard into her eyes. "You've done nothing wrong," he said. "But people don't like uncertainty. They don't like gaps in stories. In your life, it's full of holes." But she simply said, "Maybe that's because the world only ever looks at the paper, never the ink beneath it." The next morning, her door was found wide open. Her books gone. Her room empty. A single note was left on the desk. "You looked through me. Never at me. I won't be hard to find, but only if you're finally ready to see." And just like that, the orphan teacher was gone. The town didn't panic when she vanished. Not at first. They said things like, "She probably ran off," or "It's not like she had a real home." But within a week, the quiet began to ache. The students missed her calm voice, her chalkboard drawings, her way of listening without interrupting. The staff tried to fill the gap, but the classroom felt different, as if the air had thinned, as if something sacred had been broken. Then, the letter arrived. It came in a black envelope, lined with gold foil, sealed with wax that bore the same crest found in her diary. No return address, no postmark, just the school's name in precise calligraphy. The secretary opened it, skimmed the contents, and dropped it as if it burned. The principal took it to his office, locked the door, and didn't come out for 3 hours. He claimed it was nothing, just junk mail. But later that night, the janitor found pieces of it in the staff room fireplace, half burned, half glowing. What remained was enough to confirm what no one dared admit. We entrusted her with silence. But now the time has come. Let Everwin rise from the ashes. A town historian, hearing whispers about the letter, began investigating. She found the symbol in the town's oldest church. Window, buried in stained glass. No one ever looked at. A crest, nearly invisible, carved in the upper corner of the pane. The same royal seal. She traced it to a forgotten legend, a royal family exiled after war. Their last heir hidden far from the kingdom. A girl with no name but a bloodline that glowed in the dark. That night, the townspeople gathered in the library. They pieced together the diary pages the janitor had salvaged, the fragments of the letter, the stories of her classroom, and the church's secret window. Together, they realized their teacher had never been ordinary. She had been watching, waiting, maybe even protecting them, and they had laughed at her. News of her disappearance began to spread beyond the town, carried on hushed phone calls and encrypted messages. Somewhere across the ocean, a royal envoy landed quietly at a private airport. No press, no red carpet, just a group of 5, all dressed in gray suits with silver pins shaped like crowns broken in half. Their orders were clear: find the last blood of Everwin and bring her home, before someone else did. Back in the town, guilt began to bloom. The same people who had whispered behind her back were now printing her photo and posting it. Around bus stops. Missing, it said, but they knew she wasn't lost. She was hiding. A small group of her students, 3 children, who had loved her most, snuck into the woods one weekend. They carried a flashlight, a box of old chalk, and a promise not to return until they found her. They followed the trail of symbols she once taught them, drawn into bark and carved into stones, Everwin sigils, written in plain sight, yet invisible to the blind. And deep in those woods, in a small cottage cloaked in ivy, they found her. She was different now, her hair loose, her face softer. She looked not like someone who was hiding, but someone who was finally free. She welcomed them with open arms, but asked them to tell no one. Not yet. She had more to remember. What they didn't know, what even she didn't know, was that the envoy had already tracked her scent to the town's edge. They were close, too close, but the town had changed. The same principal who once questioned her identity now placed guards at every school entrance. The janitor who once swept past her now organized the local search. And the librarian pulled out books long, buried under dust and silence. Books on royal protocol, exiled bloodlines, and the oaths taken to protect the last heir. Everyone was beginning to understand. She didn't belong in this town by accident. She had been placed here for protection. But why? And who was trying to stop her from being found? That's when the oldest woman in town came forward. She claimed she had seen the baby years ago, delivered to the orphanage gates at midnight, wrapped in velvet, with a crest no one recognized and a coin marked for a kingdom lost in time. She'd said nothing then, afraid of what it might mean. Now, she couldn't keep it in. And so, the search changed from a rescue mission to a coronation. The children who found her in the woods returned to the town changed. They said nothing, but their eyes held something sacred. They began cleaning her classroom every afternoon, decorating it with fresh flowers, drawing symbols of Everwin in chalk beside the windows. Some teachers scoffed. Others stayed silent. The ones who truly understood helped. Then, one morning, the school bell didn't ring. Instead, the air filled with a deep hum, as if the wind itself had paused. Outside the school gates stood a long black vehicle. 5 men stepped out, dressed in tailored gray, moving like shadows stitched into time. The royal envoy had arrived. They didn't knock. They simply waited. Inside the school, the principal placed a worn envelope on the podium of the assembly hall. The town had gathered, unsure of what to expect. He opened the flap, unfolded the paper, and read the final page from the missing diary. I came here not to escape, but to prepare. The world once cast me aside like a forgotten branch in a storm. But even branches can take root and bloom. If you are reading this, then I trust you have seen past my silence. Know this: The crown is not made of gold. It is made of memory, pain, and duty. The hall was silent. And then, footsteps. She entered, not from the front door, but from the side of the stage. Not in rags, but in a cloak lined with soft velvet. Her faded dress now sewn with the Everwind sigil. The students stood first, then the staff, then the entire town rose to their feet in silence. It was not applause. It was reverence. She stepped to the podium, placed the diary beside the microphone, and nodded once. "I am ready," she said softly. The royal envoy bowed, not to a figurehead, but to their queen. But even then, not all welcomed her return. A man in the crowd slipped out the back. He held a phone to his ear, speaking into a line not traced by any network. "She's emerged," he whispered. "Yes, but we still hold the documents. She doesn't know what's hidden beneath the school. She doesn't know the real reason she was sent here. Because beneath the floorboards of the school's basement lay one final box, sealed in wax, guarded by time. It held the truth not just of her bloodline, but of a betrayal that began the day she was born. The town thought the story had ended, that their humble teacher had risen, reclaimed her name, and stepped into the crown waiting for her. But underneath the very ground where she had taught history, a deeper truth had been waiting, buried, boxed, and bound. The janitor, now a quiet protector of her legacy, discovered the hidden hatch by accident. Behind the boiler, behind a false wall, he found a sealed trapdoor. And beneath it, a wooden crate, aged by time and nailed shut with iron pins. Burned into its top was the royal crest, and a warning in ancient Everwind script. "Truth is the final inheritance. Do not open without her." He called the envoy. They called her. She returned, cloaked in silence and strength. No guards, no crowds, just her, the janitor, and the dusty shadows of the school basement. When the lid was pried open, what they found was not treasure, not weapons, but something heavier. Inside was a ledger, pages of names, sealed letters, coded journals, and a map that linked the town to the fall of the Everwind throne. This wasn't just where she had hidden. It was where the betrayal began. Years ago, after the crown was attacked and her mother was slain, she wasn't smuggled into hiding by strangers. She was sent directly to this town, delivered to someone meant to protect her. The mayor, a man long dead, buried with honors, praised by all. But the records showed the truth. He was the one who took the bribe. He was the one who revealed her mother's location. The coup that shattered Everwind began with his betrayal. And he took her in, not to shield her, but to erase her. But the town orphanage director, who disappeared mysteriously, had switched the plans, had smuggled her out before the deal was completed, had placed her with a midwife, changed her name, and left nothing but a royal coin in her blanket. Everything after that was fate catching up to truth. Now, the town was no longer just a place she lived in. It was a piece of her story, a scar she carried, a land that nearly buried her, yet also raised her. Standing before the townspeople once more, she didn't speak of revenge. She spoke of healing. She reopened the school, not as a teacher, but as its patron. She renamed it the House of Second Names, in honor of everyone who had ever been called less than who they truly were. She didn't move to a palace. She stayed in her small cabin until it was rebuilt into a library where every child could read and every adult could remember what silence had once hidden. And in the school's main hall, behind glass, sat her diary. Open to the last page, it read, "They laughed at me. They erased my name. But I was never meant to be known. I was meant to be remembered."